Hello, I am Marcela Ursu. I am a Romanian producer coming from Bucharest. And I met Tom after I saw his first feature named The Bucharest Experiment. This film is a fake documentary, and I truly believed it until in the end when I realized that it wasn't all true. So far, I worked with Romanian famous directors who tries to create art, like Corneliu Porumboiu and Bogdan Mirică. And Tom came to me with a script who challenges this idea and asks why art matters. And I really enjoy it, and I wanted to see the other part of the story. So here we are with our project called Quixote's Last Film. It's a fake documentary, and it's a film about a woman who makes a film. Tom, please.
Okay, a film about a woman who makes a film. I hate doing these pitches. I really hate doing them because I look out into the audience and I see in front of me a whole load of people who aspire to create art, to create film. Now, part of me thinks, should we be doing this? Should we not all become doctors? Or should we not all go out and struggle to make an unjust world fairer? Are there not more important things that we could be doing with our time? This is a question that obsesses me, and it's also a question who obsesses my main character. New slide, please. Mrs. Dumitru. Mrs. Dumitru is a patient in a Bucharest mental hospital. We discover her in the course of making a documentary about the benefits of art therapy. She's 75 years old, she's been in there for 10 years, and she has a fascinating story behind her. She was an avant-garde artist. She became disillusioned with the arts and had a breakdown. She has a friend who plays the Sancho Panza to her Don Quixote, a friend called Mrs. Popescu. Mrs. Popescu was raised almost in a familial way by Mrs. Dumitru, so she has an obligation towards her. Mrs. Popescu has 3 children. She's an ordinary woman, a single mother who's struggled to raise a family. And she's everything that Mrs. Dumitru isn't. She's emotional, she's emphatic, she can connect to people on an emotional level. Whereas Mrs. Dumitru is intellectual, she's haughty, she looks down on people. Now, Mrs. Dumitru has a fascinating thing that she tells us. She says that she created a film script for a film essay that was so controversial that it landed her under arrest and placed in a mental institution. Now, what is this great idea? What could be so controversial to land someone in a mental institution? Well, she says her claim is that the CIA are manipulating the art market, that abstract expressionism was funded by the CIA, which it was. That in the year 1399, the Medici family came together to create the idea of the aesthetic realm. They saw that society was changing, that society was becoming secular, based around the value of things, not around spiritual values, a materialistic society that needed a new religion. So the aesthetic becomes the religion of capitalism. This is what Mrs. Dumitru believes, and this is what her film is about. And so when she's released from the mental institution, the one thing that she has to do urgently is to produce this film. Time is running out because she's a 75-year-old woman. And of course, a 75-year-old woman can't make a film on her own. She's not capable of it. So this is where Mrs. Popescu, Sancho Panza, steps in. She sees the desperate loneliness of this new woman released from the institution, and she sets her up with a gallerist and a producer. The producer is fascinated by the idea of this wild, wacky concept of art being a conspiracy. It's like the ultimate example of outsider art, which is very fashionable at the moment. And so, Mrs. Dumitru gets to make her film. This takes place in an abandoned factory in Bucharest. And Mrs. Dumitru fills it with theatre flats painted to depict ancient Greece, to depict Renaissance Europe, to depict the Industrial Revolution. She fills it with extras wearing togas, men with beards in bowler hats from the Victorian era. It's camp, It's silly, it's theatrical, it's almost about the joy of cinema. These are illustrations to illustrate the history of art, which will be narrated by her voiceover. It's a film essay. Now, she keeps the script very closely guarded because it's dangerous. She's exposed a conspiracy. So over the course of the film, we see her slowly reading page by page, drip feeding the information. Now, during the course of the filming, 3 things happen. Number 1, Mrs. Dumitru blossoms before her eyes. She becomes alive. She rediscovers the joy of creating. Secondly, she becomes more and more arrogant. And thirdly, she becomes more and more paranoid because she's exposing a conspiracy. She takes this paranoia out on the person closest to her, Sancho Panza, Mrs. Popescu. Mrs. Popescu, at one point, decides enough is enough. She's had enough with all these accusations, with the egomania, and she retreats from the project. Mrs. Dumitru's emotional rock has been taken away from her, and it triggers her collapse. She realizes that she has become the embodiment of the romantic artist that she despises. She discovers that she is trapped within a contradiction. She is trying to create an artwork to undermine art. Now, if she was a true believer in her philosophy, she would pull the plug on the project and simply go home. And this, in her moment of crisis, is exactly what she does. She goes home, she retreats to a lonely, unfurnished apartment, and she stays there. Mrs. Dumitru has been brought as low as a character can possibly brought. Her relationship with the one person that matters has been destroyed, and her life project has been undermined. We see her pick up the phone, and she seems to book herself into a psychiatric hospital. Now, the final scene is rather strange and rather confusing. We see Mrs. Dumitru reading a script, a new script, not the script that she's read throughout the course of our film. It's a script in which she dictates her own happy ending. She describes a scene in which her and Mrs. Popescu enjoy a simple Sunday dinner. The children are playing outside, one of the children is watching TV, traffic buzzes on the road, all of the small things she notices that make life worth living. Now, whether or not Mrs. Dumitru has been reinstitutionalized or not doesn't really matter. What matters is that through the joy of creating and of telling stories, through the joy of illusion, Mrs. Dumitru has realized that she can become an actor rather than the acted upon. She has discovered her own sense of agency. And so a film that began as a harsh criticism of art suddenly becomes a hymn to its beauty and its redeeming qualities. And of course, the final irony is when the credits roll and the viewer finally realizes that this isn't a documentary, this is something that has been scripted and that is played by actors, then we realize that the film itself is a metaphor for the joy of pure storytelling. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for the great pitch. Mr. Baratta, if art is a conspiracy, you are at the head of the conspiracy, I think. Isn't that true?
Well, artists are supposed to know more. And conspiracy is the sole way in which we can defend ourselves from artists.
I think you're right. Thank you. Any questions you would like to ask our team? I would have liked to see Mrs. Popescu. How is she?
I struggle to find a picture of her, to be honest. She's a very ordinary woman, but she's ordinary in a positive sense. She's emotionally grounded. She's got a struggle behind her because she raised 3 daughters on her own. And although I'm not entirely certain what she looks like right now, I think her emotional qualities are what really matter in this character.
Great. So, congratulations. Very nice start. Thank you very much.